Robert. It's Alexis from Rookies Compass. Thank you so much for joining us. Just again, a little bit of a brief overview. So we are a nonprofit with our goal to shatter the stigma surrounding mental illness. Thank you for joining and sharing your story undiagnosed but not defined. One thing I noticed was that you were originally diagnosed with major depressive disorder, and then in December of 2010, you were diagnosed. You had a new diagnosis, which was complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Can you kind of describe how this update came to be and where this diagnosis came from?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I saw an adolescent psychiatrist and they said it was a major depressive disorder. But during that time, my parents were heavily involved in my treatment. So I wasn't able to share as much with the psychiatrist of what was like really going on in my life. And then once I became an adult, I took a big step away from professional psychiatric care because of things that I went through in my childhood. And it wasn't until, it was actually December of 2018, it got updated to complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And that's because finally I reached a point in my adulthood where I had to go back into professional psychiatric care. And I fully understood that when I was younger, and probably starting in third grade and up until my high school years, I actually went through conversion therapy because I'm LGBTQ, and I grew up going to a church. I grew up in a conservative part of the country, and I realized that what my parents and the church were trying to do to me was actually conversion therapy. So I got updated to complex post-traumatic stress disorder.
Got it. So that was really a result of everything that you had endured during your childhood years.
Yes, absolutely. It wasn't only the conversion therapy, it was also things that were going on within my family, within the community, and then also some things that happened in my adulthood that were traumatic. But the main core of my traumatic events and what made it the complex post-traumatic stress disorder is that it was an inescapable trauma. It wasn't just a single event like a car accident or combat experience. It was an ongoing event that went on for years that as a child I wasn't able to get away from.
Right. Now, can you explain a little bit about some of the symptoms that you experienced as a child and then versus some of the symptoms you experienced as an adult when you kind of decided to go back to therapy?
Yeah, so definitely as a child, a lot of the symptoms, the main one that I can describe as disassociation. I was very much in my own, I guess, imaginary world. I had a lot of imaginary friends. So what happened is I started getting homeschooled in third grade. So I stopped going to public school. So I got taken away from like my group of friends. And then that's when my parents really started heavy on the anti-gay rhetoric. And I think a lot of people might think that conversion therapy happens in like an office with a psychiatrist or a therapist, but the reality is it goes so undetected because it happens in the home and it happens in the church. And that's two places that are really difficult to kind of regulate what is going on because, when you're under the age of 18, your parents are your guardian. And so that it was a lot of disassociation when I was a kid. I had a lot of anxiety as a kid, and I started to have a suicidal behavior starting in like elementary school. That led to me actually being put into a psych ward when I was 16 because I wrote a suicide note and turned it into my sophomore year teacher. And got a social worker involved, and I went to a psych ward. So then CPS got involved, and my parents kind of laid off. It wasn't okay to be gay in the home, but they kind of laid off on the heavy anti-gay rhetoric because they saw that it was definitely causing me serious distress.
Absolutely.
So, as an adult, once my parents kind of like let go a little bit, I started becoming a substance abuser. So I have a long history of substance abuse as an adult. I did a lot of like kind of hardcore drugs when I was younger, but I was able to get away from that, and it just leaned very heavily into drinking. And, drinking was my crutch until it got to the point where I wasn't being hungover anymore. I was actually having like alcohol withdrawals. So I had
Wow.
to go into professional psychiatric care as an adult, and which ended up with me going into rehab. And, now I live sober and I live my life in recovery. So.
Good for you. That's amazing. Now, if you don't mind me asking, how has your relationship developed with your parents? And yeah, if you could just describe a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm actually, I really like that you asked that question because when I agreed to do this interview, I didn't want this to be some like mommy dearest tell all, like, this is what my parents did to me type of thing.
Right.
I think, over the years, I've come to realize that my parents were of a different generation. And I think that they thought that they were helping me and that was what was best because the world hasn't always been as accepting towards LGBTQ people as it is now. So I do
Mhm.
think like they were coming from a place of trying to help me. But for me, there's a meme that I saw that says, we always talk about breaking the generational curse, but let's talk about the generational truths. And I truly have wonderful memories of my childhood with my family. 5 years old, running through the gates of Disneyland. I was always provided for. We always had food on the table. We were always taking vacations. And what it's really grown into is the idea of forgiveness.
That's really awesome that you said that. And I think that's super important because, growing up in a conservative Christian household as well, one thing that we are taught is just kind of the power of forgiveness. So I think that's really awesome that you were able to kind of highlight that as well. Now, if there was anything you could say to kind of those who were in your shoes or are in your shoes and are experiencing that difficulty between parent-child relationship, do you have any advice for them, as well as maybe any advice for parents who might be in your parent shoes
Right.
who don't understand or are struggling to kind of understand?
Yeah, I do. I think what really helped me through the times beyond just the disassociation was hope for the future, really believing in my dreams, and just I had hope that I would grow up and be happy. And I can say that I have achieved happiness in my life through professional therapy and rehab. And, I work a program of going to meetings and everything. And I live happy now. And, I know that they say this a lot to LGBTQ youth, but it really does get better. And what I could say to parents is, you know, just let your children understand who they are, and it might even just be for a season that they're kind of exploring or understanding, whether it's their sexuality or the way that they dress or their gender fluidity. Allow them to explore that.
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. Now, you did mention that while you were struggling, you believed in your dreams. And actually, in your Google form, you said you believed in your dreams and you held on to hope for a brighter future. Can you kind of dive into what specifically were those dreams, and what were some tangible things that you did to, hold on to that hope?
Yeah, so when I was a child, like we watched a lot of TV and movies growing up, so I got really into the idea of working in television one day. And
Awesome.
yeah, and it was a really big dream of mine. I was involved in productions growing up. I always did like backstage work. I was never like, on stage or anything. And then it actually, so when I became an adult, I started doing hard drugs, and I was having a really difficult come down from the drugs. And I kept thinking, when is my life going to start? When is my dream? When are my dreams going to come true? And then I realized, oh my gosh, they aren't. But then I thought, you know what? I'm going to make them happy, or I'm going to make them happen. So I actually got up and I moved to New York, and I lived there for 8 years, and I had a wonderful time. And, not all of my dreams came true, but so many did. And it really kind of made everything that I went through in my traumatic childhood, it kind of it made it okay, because at the end of it all, my dreams really did come true.
Now, you did also mention, I don't know if you mentioned, or you didn't just mention it now, in your Google form, you said that you work as a recovery coach. So I think that's really awesome because, we always talk about how everybody can go to things like therapy and everybody can use different resources to just kind of keep their mental health in check. We all have mental health and it's important to take care of it consistently. So the fact that you're working as a recovery coach while you said you were also are attending outpatient psychiatric services, that's really awesome. Can you kind of describe that? Like, what is it like, doing both, being on both sides of the spectrum in a sense?
Yeah, so I think I feel like it's kind of the natural progression of getting psychiatric services. So I actually, after I went to rehab and got sober, I went and got my peer support certificate. And peer support, it's only for people who have a lived experience with mental illness or a substance use disorder. So I had co-occurring, because I'm complex post-traumatic stress disorder, as well as alcohol use disorder. And so now I work as a recovery coach, and I absolutely love it. I get to work with a wonderful group of colleagues. A lot of them are peer support as well. Some of them have psychology degrees. And we come up with a really great day program for our members, and it's kind of like a rec center for people with a mental illness to go. And we create a very safe space for people where they can come and talk about what's going on in their minds. And I always say, healthcare starts with mental health care.
Yes.
It's your brain that tells you to drag yourself out of bed, brush your teeth, eat healthy food, and get ready for your day. So healthcare starts with mental health care.
Absolutely. I love that. And we at Ricky's Compass 100% agree, substance use. I feel like a lot of the times, and it really goes with mental illness as well, with this question, but a lot of the times it's hard to, it takes they say that relapse is part of recovery. What are your thoughts on that? And kind of like, how did you finally get to the place where you were like, okay, I'm struggling from substance use disorder, I need help? How did you get to that space?
Right. So saying relapse is part of recovery, I definitely agree with that. I have gotten to the point where I say my recovery is so beyond my sobriety at this point. Mm-hmm. My recovery is the way that I think, it's the way that I live my life. It's the types of food that I eat. It's so beyond sobriety at this point. But yeah, I mean, what the thing about relapse, I'm more of like the new school way of thinking about it. It's if it happens, you just pick yourself right back up. It's not starting over, it's moving forward. I'm not a huge person that thinks that if you relapse, you have to like start over counting days like you would in Alcoholics Anonymous. I actually attend recovery Dharma meetings. Now I don't really even go to Alcoholics Anonymous anymore. So I found alternatives to Alcoholics Anonymous that work better for me. I also really like Smart Recovery, and both of those are more like, okay, if you relapse, are you okay? Do you need to go to detox? Do you need to go back to rehab, or can you just pick yourself right back up and you keep moving forward? So yeah, I mean, I think it doesn't promote like, oh, go out and have a weekend out. It's saying if it does happen, then you just move forward, but it's not starting over because you've already come so far, and your recovery is so beyond sobriety. That's the way that it gets. What got me to the point where I felt like I needed professional help, I had friends telling me that they thought I needed professional help. I didn't have health insurance for a while, but then eventually I was able to get on to New York State Medicaid, and that's when I started to get professional services. And then when I was in Arizona during COVID, I went to rehab, and fortunately enough, I was on Arizona State Medicaid, so my treatment was all paid for. And now, now I'm that person that can help connect people to services, things that I didn't know. There's a substance abuse block grant in every state, and it can get people free treatment. It might not be in some like bougie rehab, but you're going to get
Right.
therapy that you need. You're going to get the medication that you need. So there's so many grants out there that people can get. But for me, I had a friend in particular. She kind of had to come to Jesus talk with me and was like,
Mm-hmm.
we all drink heavily, but you drink at dangerous levels. And also, I wasn't able to go into work while I was going through alcohol withdrawals. And that was a big thing. I could always go into work hungover, but once it's switched to actual, like, my body was chemically dependent on alcohol, I wasn't able to function properly working and paying bills. And I was like, okay, this isn't a problem.
Right, absolutely. I think that's important. And you mentioned that, your friend had that come to Jesus talk with you. What would you say to kind of those individuals that are in her shoes, the friend that's like, something's going on, we need to have this conversation? Do you have any advice for them?
I do. The first thing is make sure that you are taking care of yourself,
Mhm.
practicing self-care, and having a support network around you. The second would be to know that you're not going to be able to fix the person, but a lot of, like, I know in my own experience, I felt like everyone was telling me I had a problem. No one was helping me find a solution to my problem. And when you're in the depths of either depression or anxiety or substance use, it's kind of difficult for you to even like drag yourself out of bed. So the best thing someone can do for someone is just connect them to resources, even if it's helping them find a social worker, and then the social worker, that's what they specialize in, to connect people to the services that they need. Because there's so much funding out there for mental health care, but the difficult side of it is when somebody is in the depths of their mental illness, it's so difficult to even get online to find those services. So I think helping someone get the funding that's out there. The government has so much funding for substance use and mental health, and just helping somebody get that funding.
Yeah, that's awesome that you mentioned that, because really, us at Ricky's Compass, we always say, we're not professionals. One of us is studying to get our master's in psychology and all of that, but like, we're not therapists, we're not that. So our goal really was to act as a compass and guide people to the right resources. So we kind of bridge the gap. And I think that's really important because, like you said, those who are struggling, sometimes they just don't have the mental capacity to just sit down and be like, this is what I need. So to be able to have a friend that's like, hey, we're going to get through this together and help you and just kind of walk you through it, I think that's really important. So I really appreciate that. Before we wrap things up, do you have anything else you would like to add? Any advice for anybody struggling or for those who aren't struggling and just want to understand mental illness better?
I think for people that are struggling, I've gone through good times in my life, and I've gone through bad times in my life, and I've gone through times when I wasn't sure how I was going to get through it. But it all starts with putting one foot in front of the other, and eventually things will really start to come together for you. And don't give up. There's a great community out there. There's beyond just like going to like Alcoholics Anonymous or something like that for substance use. Mental Health America has mental health support groups. If you're bipolar, they have bipolar support groups. So even if you aren't a substance abuser, there are support groups for you. And don't be afraid to work with professionals. I think a lot of people think that like head meds and all of that are kind of taboo or hokey, but I've tried every drug out there, and the most stability and happiness I've ever found is when I'm properly taking my prescribed medication.
That's awesome. Thank you for saying that, because I know sometimes there is that stigma surrounding, prescribed medication. Sometimes people sometimes look down upon it and aren't always proud of it and it's not something that you should be ashamed of. So I appreciate that. So you clearly have been through a lot, but you know a lot too. So is there any way for individuals, if they would like to connect with you, or anybody if they have questions, that they can reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a blog.
Yes.
It's www.robbie, Robbie, Irised, Erised. It's the word desire backwards.com. So
Ah.
it's www.robbieirisid.com. And then that's also my Instagram handle as well, Robbie Irised.
Awesome. Thank you. I didn't realize it was desire backwards because my
Yeah,
brain
it's from
doesn't
Harry
always
Potter.
function. No,
Legendary
that's
said from Harry Potter. So
gotcha. Very nice. My boyfriend's a big fan. So, no, so that's awesome. No, we really appreciate you taking the time to just share your story. And, what you're doing is making a huge difference in the community and sharing your story, and so that others can relate, but also understand what you've been through. I think that's super important. So, thank you so much for just being vulnerable and being open. So it's we truly appreciate it.
thank you so much for the opportunity. I think this is a great nonprofit.
Thank you. We really appreciate it.